Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Victory Road World Cup of VGC Friday Week 6 stream. I'm still Stefan, and back with me is David Partington for the final match of the day. That's right! If you missed it earlier, we have 5 matches this week. Every single stream is going to have 5 matches, I think. So make sure you come back for tomorrow and the day after. So much VGC action. It's going to be awesome. It has been awesome. What a fantastic day of games, David.
Yes, Stefan, it sure has. And so many of these games have been so intense and really interesting to watch as well. Really turning games on their heads and how many different plays that we've made and some of the tiny little bits of moves that people have teched on that suddenly get revealed.
Burning Jealousy, Grimmsnarl, Solar Blade, Zacian, all of the things. It's been so fun to watch. And of course, none of these games would be possible without our wonderful partners, Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafi, who have sponsored this year's Victory Road World Cup of VGC. And of course, we have a bit of a recap here. We've seen some great games. Arbin against Naoto to start things off. A great upset there with Philippines taking a game off of Japan, making them, I believe, 2-0 in the lead against Japan, which is a pretty incredible result so far.
It is, exactly. And some of these matches have been really crucial for either team to be able to either win or tie or potentially just for the glory in terms of your Costa Rica. But for this particular match with Brazil and USA, we've got some very interesting stats for you. So this is kind of the fight for the first seed.
Yes.
Because they're in the same group as Norway and Sweden, both of whom are out, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm sure Stefan will tell you a little bit more, but these teams have the exact same scores and the exact same number of game wins.
Yeah, it's been really wild. And of course, you might think to yourself, oh, this is a pointless match to watch. They're both already in the next round. What's the point? I'll tell you what the point is. First of all, they're awesome. These teams are so strong. They're kicking so much butt in this tournament. We just want to have an excuse to see these players. But of course, there is actually quite a lot to play for here because the top team of this group will play off against either Mexico or the Netherlands. Very strong teams, not to be overlooked. But the second place team is going to face South Korea, who is, I would say, probably a scarier foe than either Mexico or the Netherlands. So both of these teams will probably definitely want that first spot in the group. So it's an important match with regards to the context going into the top 16 as well. But the stats, as you mentioned, are crazy. Last week, these teams are in a group with Norway and Sweden. Last week, Brazil 8-0'd Norway, and then the US fired back with an 8-0 of Sweden. A Sweden team that looked really strong in the first group stage. They looked awesome in the qualifiers, and yet they came out here. They did pretty okay against Brazil in week number 1. They lost 5-3. Norway also lost 5-3 to the US. But this week number 2 for the Scandinavian teams was not kind.
No, and it looks like US have been doing a few things behind the scenes as well as Brazil during the qualifier stages because they've both come out and just absolutely destroyed them. Both actually lost in top 16 last year to USA lost to Spain and Brazil lost to Korea in top 16. So both of them were looking really strong and then just suddenly kind of got cut out of it really early on in the top cut. So they're both really showing themselves to be maybe not just top 16 teams, but maybe a little bit higher than that based on how well they've been doing versus Norway and Sweden, who are not teams that you want to shake a stick at. These are good players. And going into the actual match itself, we can see US are up 2-0 currently. And looking at Justin Burns' team as well, that's pretty interesting stuff too that they've been kind of working on here with a Trevenant and a Seismitoad, Stefan.
Yeah, I have seen people talking about the Trevenant tech. Every time before Worlds, we wonder, is there going to be a niche pick? Ever since 2014, there's always the question, is somebody going to bring the next Pachirisu? And people are thinking about Trevenant. I have seen it pop up in conversations a couple times. So it's really cool to see that getting a pretty solid 2-0 win over a pretty established archetype there. If a little bit of a more supportive variant of the Swordfish, but still a really good win there for Justin. Really, really cool tech on that team. Jeremy Rodriguez also getting a win with an uncommon Pokemon in Weavile. So the wins here for the US so far, looking really, really interesting, but a good position in this match for sure. Brazil, though, looking to fire back with Hugo versus Joe here.
Yeah, exactly. And these players themselves have been pretty consistent throughout their time in the World Cup. So Hugo is 2-1 going into this season, and Joseph Ugarte is 2-0. So currently undefeated and as good as he can be at the moment for US, as they've only kind of joined in the group stages pretty much. Both these players have been using pretty different teams as well, and as we can see from looking at Brazil versus US here, also quite varied teams going too. So there's not been a lot for either team to kind of prep for and read against, for as no one seems to be going for like comfort yet. Everything's been switching up. Like Joseph's been using Kaliais Palkia. He's used Zacian Calyrex Shadow Blastoise. There's been a whole lot of different stuff being used.
Yeah, and this is also an interesting one because while this match does matter, while it does have an impact on the top 16 bracket, we are also a week out from Worlds, and many of these players are qualified for Worlds. So, are they going to be hiding their real tech? Or maybe is this a good opportunity to sort of test the team that you might want to bring against some really strong opposition? We can see here just how strong that opposition is. We've got Joe, of course. Everybody knows Joe's results. Top 4 at NAIC this year, top 4 at EUIC this year, the champion of the Portland Regional back in 2020, and a finalist at Daytona. So, Joe is consistency personified. But Hugo, on the other side, qualified for Worlds twice, of course, represented Brazil last year with a 4-2 record in the World Cup of VGC. So, no slouch either. And, of course, as you mentioned, 2-1 so far with different teams every week. So, a very scary kind of player to play against, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And like those accolades from Joseph Ugarte, it's definitely intimidating if I'm Hugo. And like there's definitely a big brain under that, like head of Lush's hair too. So it's going to be an interesting match for this fifth and final match of today's stream. So we're going to be looking shortly at those teams. And as you can see, Joe's using Lunadon, Incin, Charizard, Venusaur, Grimmsnarl. And on Hugo's end, it's kind of a similar team to what we saw earlier in the stream, actually. Swordfish, Incineroar, Zapdos, Whimsicott, and the Kartana. So the double grass running there with a little bit of speed control too.
This is a really interesting team that we have on Hugo's side. It's very reminiscent of the variant of Swordfish that Eric Rios was using back in sort of April-May time, but the Kartana replacing the Rillaboom, offering a lot more offensive pressure. Of course, you lose the Grassy Glide, which isn't quite as great for the mirror, but Kartana's pretty good in the mirror anyway. And this is kind of interesting. We see so many different takes of Swordfish running around, but so many people are also just sort of defaulting to 2 or 3 Swordfish 6. So even when you see something like this, which is 5 very common Pokemon, but then also a 6 that's usually not slotted in with those other 5, it's always very cool to see how this is going to play out.
I think so. And like Hugo obviously has the option of Dynamaxing quite a few of his Pokemon. You got Kyogre, which has obviously been quite a popular Dynamax. Kartana, very much you do want to, because a lot of those boosts that you're getting from those attacks are pretty huge. And if you can get a net at Beast Boost, that's pretty good too. Zapdos, we often see maybe like Life Orb, Thunderbolt, like 3 attacks potentially, or we often see maybe the more bulky Eerie Impulse, Roost kind of stuff. So either way, Zapdos is the lead here. So I may be expecting something like maybe an Eerie Impulse, because that's pretty good into, say, Venusaur, especially if you're maybe that goggle set that some Zapdos do sometimes run. However, it's the Lunala Incineroar lead on Joe's end. So Trick Room or Meteor Beam is a pretty strong option going into this lead from Hugo.
Yeah, this is a bit of a read-heavy lead on both sides. Of course, Zapdos, if it has access to the Eerie Impulse, it can just drop that into the Lunala, and that'll be a really, really good turn 1 play. Opting instead to switch out, though. There are a lot of resists to that rock type. Meteor Beam, at least 2 of them, at least, with Zacian and Kartana. But of course, Kartana doesn't really have any special defense, so it's going to be a switch into the Kyogre, though. Fake out into the Whimsicott, and Trick Room just coming out from Lunala. So nothing too weird here on turn number 1. Joe just deciding, I want to play the Trick Room mode.
Yeah, and I don't blame him for it, really, because looking on Hugo's team, it's just the Incineroar that seems pretty slow on his end, and everything else seems quite fast. So, and Joe knows the speed stats of his Pokemon. He knows his Groudon speed, and it's probably pretty slow, and it's just the Incineroar that's going to underspeed it, and even then you hit that pretty hard too. So if you're that boosting Groudon that we often do see on Lunadon with that Swords Dance or Bulk Up, then it's looking pretty nice if you can kind of check this Kyogre a decent amount. And we do see the switch into it right now.
Alrighty, so the Groudon comes on in. Of course, the Sun gonna neuter the damage of that Kyogre, at least somewhat. Encore coming in. That's a really cool bit of tech already shown. Unfortunately, though, it's not gonna accomplish very much. going into the Groudon that hasn't even used a move yet. And, you know, when you're running something like Encore, it really sucks to show that to your opponent without getting anything in exchange.
Yeah, it does, exactly. It's something you kind of want to reveal maybe game 2, game 3, like out of the bout there. But yeah, not this time. But he is able to get a water spout off, which isn't doing a whole lot of damage, actually, thanks to that parting shot plus the sun now. So Joe's positioned himself quite nicely, even with a crit on the Venusaur there. Venusaur's going to be pretty slow right now, but Groudon's in a decent position to be firing some stuff out, because if Hugo wants to get that rain back out, he's got to switch his Kyogre back out, and that's his main way of damaging this Groudon.
I really like the way that Joe is choosing to target this turn. He's going for the double into the Whimsicott, and you might think, well, okay, but that's kind of pointless. Like, why would you use Leaf or Max Vine Lash into the Whimsicott? Well, if the Whimsicott doesn't switch out, it's just going to go down to the Groudon anyway. So it's not actually going to be hitting the Whimsicott, regardless of what Hugo does. So really, really nice targeting by Joe, just covering as many options as possible. But we'll see what Hugo decides to go for here. Does withdraw the Whimsicott. What's going to be eating that Groudon hit? A Zapdos. So if that's the Heat Crash, that's still going to do quite a lot of damage.
Yeah, it is. Maybe it's hoping it's maybe the fire move or maybe even a ground move into that slot so Zapdos can take the hit. Maybe just a Precipice Blades, but Hugo's definitely on the back foot at the moment. But Joe's going for the Dynamax with his Venusaur in the sun, so it's the slowest thing on the field at the moment, but maybe that's Vine Lash is something that he really wants to get up in this game, so he can start getting the chip on everything, put everything in range of his lovely Groudon and potentially Lunala in the back. Kyogre is going for the Protect, so no Assault Vest on this team just yet. The Groudon goes straight for the Heat Crash, so into a Zapdos that's going to do a decent amount of damage, and it definitely does. Vine Lash coming out now, so an excellent play by Joe, really calling the defensive play on Hugo's end there, and getting a KO on a Zapdos, which is a pretty big slot to be getting rid of, especially if it's kind of an eerie impulse threat, and with Airstream as well into Venusaur, that's pretty big. So a great KO, and Kyogre's taking a bit of chip, and it's still stuck in the sun.
Yeah, and of course Trick Room's still an option as well. So even if there were something in the back like a Kartana that would on paper do pretty well into a Groudon, in Trick Room, not really going to be the case. However, Heat Crash being revealed is actually a big deal in a matchup like this, because if you're Hugo, Heat Crash on Groudon is really nice to know about because it doesn't actually hit Dynamax targets. It's a weight-based move. All weight-based moves are, you cannot target Dynamax Pokemon with them. So what that means, practically speaking, is that the Groudon can't actually hit the Kartana with a fire move unless the Groudon is maxed itself. So that might actually make Hugo feel comfortable enough to try to bring Kartana into game number 2, maybe try to position around that into a spot where maybe you stall out the Dynamax of Joe's Groudon, or instead you force the Dynamax onto another Pokemon and then lean on a Kartana endgame.
Yeah, like, I just notice how, like, quick Joe is, like putting his, like, moves in. Like, it's just, like, it's so quick, and, like, he knows exactly what he's playing for at the moment, and it seems to be going his way at the moment. However, yeah, like, Venusaur being in Trick Room in the sun at the moment is maybe not exactly what like Joe maybe had planned for like the long term here. Maybe expecting Hugo to like maybe switch out his Kyogre a bit, switch it back in, and therefore Venusaur gets a little bit slower, and then you suddenly get Venusaur, your Gigantamax Venusaur, underspeeding any potential Zacian. But that's not the case at the moment, and it's actually kind of looking like a sitting duck in front of the Zacian right now. But Hugo decides to go for his Dynamax here, not wanting to switch out Kartana, his Kyogre just yet, and going on the defensive with the Zacian this time, as we know Joe is also going for the Max Guard. So let's see if Hugo's gone for the target with his Kyogre here.
Oh, well, here we go. We do see initially the Precipice Blade is going to be doing quite a bit of damage there to that Dynamax Kyogre. Here comes the Hailstorm going into the Groudon there, and the Groudon is going to take a reasonable amount of damage, but still going to be looking very, very healthy there regardless, especially given no Protect or anything. That's a pretty well-taken attack there by the Groudon. Not quite getting the damage that Hugo would have wanted to, I think, but kind of forced into that Dynamax there. It's really very, very difficult for him to kind of maneuver this at this point. It's really just trying to stall out Trick Room as best as he can.
Yeah, I kind of like the play from Joe there, because if Kyogre is going to go for the Dynamax, go for an attack, it's not going to be a Max Lightning because it's going to go into Groudon or a Max Guarding Venusaur, but it has to be something that changes the weather. And therefore, Venusaur is regardless going to be able to outspeed next turn, assuming the attack goes into the Groudon. So I quite like that, and now Venusaur does get that extra attack hit this time, and if that's a Max Quake, it's going to be doing a huge amount of damage, boost your Groudon special defense even further. So he's still definitely in the driver's seat right now, and this Venusaur suddenly getting a little bit more use this time.
Well, Max Guard coming in on that Kyogre, going to allow another stalled turn of Dynamax here. The Precipice Blades is going to dish out a little bit of damage to the Whimsicott. Even though Whimsicott's not very bulky, it does resist the hit, so that's kind of neat. But Vine Lash coming on into that Whimsicott, probably actually going to be enough to remove it from play. And despite 2 resisted hits, the Whimsicott does not manage to survive. Going to be going on down. But, all right, well, I believe that's the last turn of Dynamax for the Venusaur, at least. So that's been stalled out. And of course, the Kyogre does have 1 turn left itself. But look, even as a Dynamax Pokemon, the residual is just adding up on that Kyogre.
Yeah, now Trick Room does expire this time. So Zacian was looking pretty good in the back, and it is the one to come in this time. So kind of threatening a double KO right now. And Joe does have Incineroar and Lunala in the back, as we know. So Kyogre still being like Dynamaxed at the moment does mean that it's doing single target damage. So there is the potential to try and switch in and maybe get around this Kyogre's water move that could come out. So you could maybe get an Incin in and maybe lower the attack on the Zacian. But at the moment, I think if you're Joe, if you can get in your Lunala and Incineroar in again, that you can get up a second Trick Room and potentially stall out the rest of this game versus what Hugo's got, because these are his last 2 Pokemon. So let's see where this Zacian targets and how Joe really plays around it.
Well, the Behemoth Blade is going to be able to pick up either of these Pokemon, whichever one Hugo decides to go after. It is going to be the Venusaur here. Doesn't want to have to deal with any kind of Sleep Powder shenaniganry. And generally speaking, Kyogres are not really going to be slower than Groudons. And of course, we've already seen the speed interactions in this game. So a nice quick double KO here for Hugo on this turn, evening out the score at 2 Pokemon apiece. That does, however, mean that we're going to be getting a double free switch in. The Lunala is going to be coming right on back in, and I believe it was the Incineroar that was the final Pokemon, so Fake Out's going to be a threat. Intimidate's going to be something that has to be considered, and, you know, that second Trick Room, I don't really know how Hugo can deny it, so it's going to be tough for him to find his way through here. We do, of course, see that Meteor Beam, of course, an option. But Moongeist Beam, of course, doesn't have the 10% miss chance, so I don't think we're going to have any reason to see Meteor Beam used here this game. Fake Out, Trick Room, and then Joe should be able to clean this up.
I wonder if on Hugo's end it was maybe like slightly better to like finish off the Groudon with a Hailstorm, so that then the end, once Trick Room goes up, you still have like a bit of a Hail Chip to try to chip that Shadow Shield, so then the next turn you could do a little bit more damage. But remains to be seen whether that would come into play or not, because like your Water moves are maybe going to finish off this Incineroar anyway, but like that Kyogre, as we know, is not Assault Vest, so it's probably not going to be able to take any sort of Moongeist Beam or Meteor Beam attack. However, it does have Protect, so if Hugo does decide to kind of play around these single target moves that Joe has, then it is possible, and there is the Protect on the Kyogre here.
Alright, we also saw Trick Room not clicked here. So Fake Out goes into the Zacian, and then the Moongeist Beam is just going to go right into the Protect. So effectively, the only thing that happened there was that Fake Out was stalled out. So an interesting decision to go for that. I wonder if the Lunala potentially has speed investment that would make it faster than the opposing Kyogre. I'm wondering if that's the case here that is making Joe not want to actually go for a secondary Trick Room here. But Zacian, of course, a threat still. But, you know, with that Intimidate, Zacian's not going to be able to pick up either of these KOs here. I guess a critical Sacred Sword would get it on the Incineroar, but still a bit of an awkward spot. Protect does come out, though, on the Incineroar. Second time we've seen Protect Incineroar today. Seems to be picking up in usage a little bit, as Behemoth Blade going right on into that Lunala. Is that going to do enough damage to allow an Origin Pulse to pick up here? Lunala's still pretty beefy, but it is faster.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So, like, still going with the Trick Room mode, but being particularly fast. And Kyogres aren't usually that slow either. So, that's probably quite a decently speedy Lunala. And Moongeist Beam is enough to pick up the KO as well. So, with the protecting Incineroar, it's stalled out not much, but it didn't really need to at this point. So, as we can see, Zacian is kindly now at neutral, and it may not even be enough to pick up this Lunala based on that massive HP stat. So it is in the rain. Fallow Blitz is not going to be doing as much damage as before. So here comes the Behemoth Blade. Let's see if it's enough to pick up the KO now. The Shadow Shield is down. It is not. So it is looking pretty over at the moment for this game one.
Yeah, if that would have been able to pick up, then there's still a small chance. But I think Joe is still fine unless he gets crit by a Sacred Sword the next turn afterwards. So overall, very well-positioned endgame by Joe. Hugo really taking it to him at the end there, kind of making it a little bit more tense than it initially looked like it might be. But 1-0 for Joe here, as we'll have to see what the adjustment is from our Brazilian representative. Seeing that speed on the Lunala is really good, protect on the Incin is really good. A lot of really good information was gained on both sides there. So it's always really interesting to see how the players, especially this high level of players, will adjust to that in game number 2 and utilize that information that they picked up in the first game to better inform their decisions in game number 2.
Yeah, I like the way Joe played that though in those first few turns, because no matter what Hugo did there, like he switched in the Kyogre as the Trick Room was going up. And then he went for the attack with the incoming Groudon. But because of the way like Joe covered it with the sun coming up and then the parting shot, even if Hugo maybe goes to the Dynamax and gets up the rain going into that following turn, then the parting shot still comes out, and then you get the Venusaur in, which might be even slower than the Kyogre anyway. And you're able to still Dynamax that potentially, and then go from there. And you've already kind of gotten the Kyogre to Dynamax, which is kind of what you maybe want in that scenario. So, like, it was kind of like a hard spot. But unfortunately, the Encore, for instance, from Hugo's Whimsicott wasn't doing anything that turn. And that could have been a turn where Zapdos could have come in, or a turn where it could have maybe got another attack, chip a Shadow Shield on or something. But there was definitely a little bit more that could have happened there. But to see, definitely on Joe's end, he definitely didn't really need to play kind of hard or like with any hard reads or anything.
Yeah, it was really kind of just the game plan working out there for Joe in game number 1, and that's always nice. So just knowing, all right, my game 1 game plan was fine, didn't have to really adjust too much on the fly, and just kind of went really well. Hugo, of course, needed to get a couple of big reads just to make it as close as he did. But here we go. All right, the Whimsogre lead versus, once again, Lunala, and this time it's Venusaur on the lead, though. So an interesting option on either side once again. We do, of course, know some interesting stuff about these Pokemon already. We do know that the Lunala is faster than that Kyogre, and of course, we also know that the Whimsicott does have Encore. So, really see that being a huge deal into the Venusaur, but being able to Encore the Trick Room option is definitely a threat. But with this kind of a speed tiering, I don't really think that Joe is likely to click Trick Room here, but it's a weird situation, right? A bit of a mind game you won, because Whimsicott could go for the Tailwind to negate the speed advantage, and then Trick Room is amazing. But if you Trick Room and the Whimsicott just went for like something like a Taunt or something, then all of a sudden you're not in a great spot anymore. So a weird Game 2 lead that both players are going to have a lot of different layers to consider.
Yeah, and whether something to also consider, because we know the Lunala does actually naturally outspeed the Kyogre here. And Venusaur, you typically also want to be quite fast, so you can outspeed stuff once that you've brought up the sun by your own Groudon. But as we know, like Joe's going actually for the Dynamax here, and it's going to be that Venusaur. And because we know he's going for the Dynamax, we know it's a bit slower than this Kyogre, so the Trick Room is definitely going to be beneficial. And as we know, the Lunala outspeed, it's probably not a max speed Venusaur. And as we've seen from the HP stat, it's probably quite a bulky one too. So it can kind of play in and out of Trick Room as he so wants to, which is quite nice for him, because it means Hailstorm is not going to be doing too much damage, especially if a Hailstorm comes out and your Focus Sash, it's going to be able to take you down to the Sash and just pick you off. So I like this play from Joe. The Venusaur worked out quite well last time, and in Trick Room, Zacian's no longer safe either.
All right, so double Dynamax here. Tailwind does go off, so the fastest thing on the field is definitely going to be this Kyogre. But even going for a Max Hailstorm there, that's pretty good damage that's going to be coming on into the Venusaur. Going to get rid of the Shadow Shield with the Hail Chip as well. Super nice. But this is going to be a lot of damage that the Venusaur can also get off with the G-Max Vine Lash into that Kyogre. And of course, the residual that we talk about oh so much, but the Meteor Beam going to come out as well. So not sure which one that's going to be targeting. With +1, that might even be enough to take the Whimsicott down to Sash. I haven't really seen Lunala into Whimsicott that many times, but I guess we'll find out in a second if that's the target. But no, it is in fact going to be the Kyogre. About 20% onto the Kyogre, while the Vine Lash is going to come in and dish out a fair bit more.
Yeah, I suppose if you're trying to go for the Trick Room and you're a little bit scared of the Encore, you don't want to go for Trick Room and then switch into your Groudon, which is kind of like Kyogre bait at this point. Actually, if Kyogre's gone for the Dynamax and just threatening those geysers. So it kind of makes sense to maybe just go for the attack this time, but like Hugo's kind of made it almost a read here, like that Lunala's not going to go for the Trick Room and go through his own Tailwind, because if you're going straight for that, like you're definitely not expecting Joe to go for the Trick Room, which kind of pays off for him here. Because it means that Kyogre can do some more stuff this turn, and Whimsicott does actually threaten the Encore into Lunala again with a Meteor Beam, forcing it to potentially go for like another charging turn and making it definitely a sitting duck. So either Joe needs to switch out into his Groudon, which would mean it underspeeds the Kyogre again, or he goes for the safe protect as he's going for here.
Double protect here coming out from Joe. We could see a little bit more chip coming out from the Kyogre with Max Geyser if that's what it's opting for, but Hailstorm makes a lot more sense going into the Venusaur slot, threatening that. But a good way to stall out the second turn of Dynamax and also the second turn of Tailwind from Joe. This is going to be a big one, though, because once again, Encore is still threatened into the Lunala. You can threaten it into just consistently using Protect over and over again, and that's not going to be super beneficial either. So a bit of a weird turn here, as it's going to be Moongeist Beam, and is the Venusaur going to switch? That's the real question. I feel like going into the Groudon on the Lunala side might make the Venusaur faster than that Tailwind Kyogre, but you know, you're never really sure because some people will run like max speed Kyogre, which is faster than Venusaur. So we haven't quite seen the full extent of that Kyogre's speed investment yet, so not quite the safest play, and Joe opting instead to switch in the Incineroar on the Venusaur side to maintain that Venusaur for later.
Yeah, so fairly safe switch. It'd be pretty hard read to be a Geyser into the Dynamax Venusaur, so I quite like this. Hugo's also kind of in range with Vine Lash plus hail damage as well, so he may want to be able to change the weather as well right now to a Geyser so that he can actually live going into the following turn. Encore does successfully come out into the Lunala, so that's going to be stuck into for Protect for a few turns, but they're sticking with the Hailstorm, not wanting that Venusaur to be getting off more attacks, and Incineroar is able to come in and take that pretty nicely. But also on the when that Kyogre is just about to go down, probably to this Vine Lash very shortly coming out. A little more reveal of the speed tier still. Nothing too huge coming out because the Tailwind's still there, and yeah, Vine Lash is enough. So if Joe does have his Groudon in the back, it's looking pretty nice to be able to get up the weather that he wants, and especially with no Trick Room being up, Venusaur can come back in and potentially Sleep Powder lots of stuff.
Yeah, of course, Sleep Powder, always an option, always a threat. But the Zacian coming in here for Hugo is also going to be a little bit threatening on its own side. You know, having that +1, not being intimidated, going for a Sacred Sword into the opposing Incineroar will absolutely remove that from play. Lunala's not a threat right now because it's just Encored into Protect anyway. So this is an opportunity for Joe to get a free switch in with Fake Out. But I believe this is also the last turn of Tailwind. So if Joe goes for this free switch, fakes out the Zacian, it is going to allow Hugo to just click Tailwind again.
It is, yeah. So there goes the Fake Out into the Zacian. It's not going to be doing a whole lot of damage this turn. Moonblast is the choice into the Venusaur slot, which was the Lunala. Either way, not a huge KO, but it's putting Venusaur in range, potentially after some hail of another Moonblast, which could be quite key for Hugo's game plan going forward. Yeah, Venusaur's looking pretty low now. But going into the next turn, yeah, Zacian's able to like come out and dish out a lot of damage and just get another KO here. As you said, Stephos, Tailwind can just go straight back up now. So Joe's in a tricky spot here, potentially because he's not in Trick Room.
Yeah, this is still a bit of a 50-50 for Hugo's side. You know, the Groudon could switch in and allow the Venusaur to go fast, in which case Tailwind is great. Or the Groudon could switch in on the other side to allow for a Flare Blitz, trying to read a KO on the Venusaur or something. But we do see the Venusaur staying in, getting that additional speed from Chlorophyll and Groudon's Drought. But actually, no Tailwind, so Weather Ball is just going to come through unhindered. That is a strong Fire-type move now into the Zacian, boosted by the Sun, and that is a gigantic turn there for Joe. Hugo just letting his second restricted go down, essentially for free.
Yeah, that's really huge. I mean, Venusaur does end up going down here, and I suppose you don't now need the Tailwind so much, based on what's in the back. Assuming your Kyogre, well, not even Kyogre anymore, considering what you have in the back is fast, but it is just the Incineroar now. Like, Zacian, Kyogre down, this is your only means of offense, really. The one saving grace, I suppose, is Lunala has used up its Power Herbal and its Meteor Beam, so that's kind of dead weight in front of Incineroar at the moment, especially if Hugo's also carrying Protect. But yeah, it's this Groudon now that's going to be really hard for Hugo to deal with because it's just looking so healthy.
Yeah, and we did see that Joe's Incineroar is faster, which threatens the Fake Out onto Hugo's Incineroar. We did see Joe did not lock into the Fake Out, but of course Hugo doesn't know that. So Lunala's going to come back in to reset the attack drop on the Groudon whenever it comes back into play. And, well, there's the Fake Out coming on in, so, you know, Joe not going to get anything too notable done this turn. A bit of chip coming out from that Whimsicott. Whimsicott has to carry a lot of weight right now, but that's pretty good damage onto the opposing Incineroar.
Yeah, so good call by Hugo. He knows that Joe probably wants to play a little bit defensive, make sure the Groudon comes in unintimidated so you get maximum damage output. So makes the call and goes into the Incineroar. But to be honest, this is probably what Whimsicott needs to do at this point. We've seen the Moonblast, Tailwind, and the Encore. There's not much else being revealed at the moment. No kind of like light screen or anything. Moonblast does a good chunk of damage actually, and almost picks up the KO on this Incineroar. But we're about to see what the kind of speed interactions are of these two Incineroar after this Lunala's attack, which is likely into this Whimsicott.
Yeah, getting that KO is a pretty big deal. We do see, of course, the Incineroar on Joe's side of the field may even survive because it's going into the resisting Incineroar here. We'll have to see. Only 12 HP. It does go down. Okay. So, if there's a Darkest Lariat, that probably picks up the KO here.
Okay.
It's
so
KOs. Who goes? Oh, no. Oh my lord! 2 HP. I was gonna say Hugo's not in a great spot, but he might still be able to win off the back of Precipice Blade's misses. We saw that the rock move is Stone Edge, which can also miss a lot. Maybe misses get him out of this, but even the resisted Heat Crash, when paired with additional damage from Moonguy's Beam, is probably going to be more than enough here. The Incineroar is going to need multiple hits of Flare Blitz to be able to take down both of these Pokemon. And it still wouldn't have been promising for Hugo, but it is a lot less promising now that Lunala survived.
Unfortunately, yeah. I think at this point you maybe need Bright Powder Incineroar to really kind of bring it out. I hope I haven't willed that into existence now for Worlds, but that would just be horrible. Saying that, I did face Focus Band Grimmsnarl at a recent regional, and twice in a row, which was something. So Heat Crash comes out and the Moonguy's Beam. With a critical hit on top, but I'm not sure of how much that mattered. There is a little bit of recovery. Right. So, is it Big Super Berry? No, just
nope.
Okay.
It's a small berry.
Crit Spurn? Nope. It's the Darkest Lariat. It's okay too. Yeah. So Hugo kind of just banking on maybe Joe going for the inaccurate moves, but he does not choose to, going straight for that Heat Crash. So
okay, hear me out, David.
All right, go.
All right, Heat Crash. We saw that was a crit. It's probably a 3-hit KO from here.
Okay.
So, or a 2-hit KO, maybe at best. What about this? He gets the Heat Crash.
Sure.
Flare Blitz goes in. The Incineroar is intimidated, so it doesn't take that much recoil damage. It burns the Groudon, which lets the Incineroar live one more Heat Crash, and then it crits the next Flare Blitz and wins the game.
Okay, that's...
There's an out.
there is an out, Stefan. That is a good point. So, it's not out yet, and Hugo is definitely thinking about it. He's like, right, it's in... Don't do too much this turn, and then the next do loads. So
that's still out. Too much damage. Never mind.
It's quite a lot, to be fair. And
maybe the crit in Sun. Maybe no. Not quite.
Not from this little cat, unfortunately. Groudon is restricted for a reason, and it looks like whatever Joe clicks here, I think it's going to be fine. And that's going to bring the United States of America up. I think 3-0 versus Brazil, and also Joseph Ugarte of the USA up in 3-0 in this set. So congrats to him.
Yep, just a great sort of a clinic on how to play the Lunadon there. Just a great game there by Joe. Really, really strong set. And Hugo put up a fight. Really put up a fight. But unfortunately, Joe just looked like he knew what he needed to do in that matchup. I mean, the speed, the blazing speed at which he was inputting his moves, which is a bit of a hallmark of Joe games that we've casted in recent times. He just knows his matchups very, very well. So a really, really tough draw there for Hugo, but Joe looking really, really strong, taking his 3rd win in this World Cup. And that's going to be it for this match. 2 2-0s to end the day. It started off with a lot of 2-1s, but what an amazing day of games we've had today.
It really is, Stefan. And it's one of those weeks where everyone's been prepping for Worlds so much now, and so everyone's kind of bringing their A game. Everyone's been anyone who hasn't really been practicing too much or wants to come to London, wants to go to Worlds, and even if you're not qualified at Worlds, there's a load of people going to the London Open as well to be able to get that CP for the next format too, next season. So there's a lot of prep going in here. There's a lot of people using this as a really good chance to go against these really amazing players from all over the world with a team that they're thinking of using. and also to kind of just elevate their own country status too.
Yeah, and it's been just such a fantastic tournament. We've seen a lot of upsets, maybe not so much today. Arbin beating Naoto was kind of cool, but some of the upsets that we've had going on in this group stage, and I mean, even in the qualifier stage, have been great. It seems to be a hallmark of the World Cup of VGC. Last year we had some great upsets. This year we have some amazing ones coming through as well. So it's just such a fun tournament to follow. And if you guys would like to follow along with the tournament, we have a lot of different socials for you to check out. Of course, the Twitch channel. You're currently on the Twitch channel, so follow if you're not followed already. There's still plenty of World Cup of VGC action coming around. But there on screen, you also have the links to the YouTube, which does have exclusive games. Not all of the recorded matches are played on stream. Some of the YouTube ones, the ones that are not on stream, won't have commentary, but it's still a great way for you to see more of the World Cup matches that are happening. You can follow us on Twitter at VGC Victory Road. Of course, join the Discord. But most importantly, in my opinion at least, that website at the bottom, worldcupvgc.com, has so many different ways that you can follow along with the action, all of the information that you could possibly need, information on the groups, information on the standings, information on the current matches, the teams that are being used, random usage information that looks really, really cool. For example, did you know that the Pokemon with the highest win rate is Dusclops in this tournament?
No, I didn't, Stefan. So thank you for letting us know that.
Yeah, if you would like to have random cool facts like that, the website has them, so go check it out.
I think that's a good idea. And you can follow in the individual standings of each player as well within each country. So you can see there's the individual standings as well as the country standings, which I kind of feel like is quite cool. And therefore the whole World Cup in itself is a kind of a nice way to be able to say, right, I was a World Cup competitor, but I went 3-1 for my country. That's such a nice thing to say if you got that far. Not for me personally, but
not for me either. But for other people, it's really cool to be able to show off your win rate in the World Cup. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's such a wonderful tournament. We wouldn't be able to be here, of course, without the support of our wonderful sponsors and our partners, Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafee, who have helped to make this tournament amazing, who have helped to put up a pretty impressive prize pool, and just it's been an amazing tournament so far. And of course, a shout out that I always like to give to the back room staff sort of at Victory Road, all of the admins, all of the people who are involved in the stream production, picking the matches. There's so many people involved in making this tournament as much of a spectacle as possible, and everybody is just doing such an incredible job.
They are. So thank you so much for all of them. But we shall be back at the same time tomorrow evening, 4 p.m. UTC time. If you were so wanting to come down for another 5 matches stream. So please do stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, that is us from Victory Road, and Stefan and myself, David Partington. Thank you so much for joining, and we will probably see you tomorrow.